If you watch cycling YouTube content, you've surely came across his YouTube channel. In today's video, we have a guest on the channel, and it's Jeff from NorCal Cycling. What's up guys, my name is Charles and welcome back to my cycling YouTube channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more cycling content. Jeff has been making cycling content for the past 6 years on YouTube, and I do have a lot of questions for him. This video is quite long, so see it like a podcast. Head over to the timestamp in the description down below to skip to whatever piques your interest. All right, without further ado, let's get right into the call. Hey, what's up, Jeff? Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thanks, Charles. Good to be here, man.
Yeah, a lot of people were super hyped to have you on the channel because they want to know more about you. We often have you behind the camera racing your bike, but now you're in front of it and you're gonna answer a bunch of questions that I got for you.
Let's do it. I'm ready. Got my tea. I'm ready to go.
Great. For those who doesn't know you, could you just give a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. Well, so I've been in the sport for about 10 years competitively, but before that, I was also a bike rider, not necessarily a racer, and live in the Silicon Valley. California native my entire life, kind of bounced around the state a little bit, but landed here in the Bay Area now. Race for Team Mike's Bikes. Yeah.
Well, since you said you've been riding for 10 years, what made you fall in love with cycling in the first place?
Good question. And you know, I was a latchkey kid, which means that I was given a long leash when I was growing up, and my parents were from a small town, so they were just go out and do whatever you want during the day and just come back safely at night. So I was always on my bike. That was my initial impression with the sport and with being on two wheels, and the love of the sport was it was my means to get around. So I used it to get to school. I used it to visit my friends, and then that kind of turned into BMX, and then that turned into mountain biking, and then when I went to college, went to UC Davis, which is a really strong cycling community. They have a really strong collegiate race team. And although I didn't race on the collegiate race team, that's when I really became a fan of the skinny tire, the road bikes. But yeah, so I guess my love of the sport in general started when I was very young, and it just kind of transformed and went different directions. And I've really hit my stride with road racing and especially criterium racing.
That's great. So you said you've been riding for 10 years, but you've also been making YouTube videos for the past 6 years. How does that started for you?
Well, yeah, so I guess my channel is 6 years old. I mean, you mentioned that and I had to look it up. I was like, yeah, I guess the channel is 6 years, but the first like 3 maybe were I just had the channel and I didn't really do anything with it. I posted here and there. So my original intention wasn't to be where I'm at now, which is pursuing a side hustle and pursuing the content that I make and putting the time and effort into it. It started just as a means to upload content from races, and I was one of those guys who would slap the GoPro on my bike, go to a race, and then offload all 60 minutes of the race to YouTube of the and just the jarring race content without anything really to speak of in terms of analysis. Just here it is. And I would share it with my teammates and we'd break it down internally. And then it kind of evolved from there. You know, I guess the first thing I did after that was I cut the terrible noise of the road rattle out of the footage. And then I maybe threw in some background music. And then it was just a slow and steady progression of adding more and more value to the content. And then here I am now talking into a camera, into a microphone and doing pretty high production value from where I started.
Yeah, and at what point did it start to took off in terms of the views and the subscribers? Was it a specific moment into your journey?
It was, it wasn't a specific moment. I would say I could probably put my finger on a race that I uploaded that got more than 1,000 views for the first time. And that was a pretty big milestone. And to this day, I remember thinking like, wow, if I could imagine a room of 1,000 people all watching my video, it's crazy to think about, So, and that was the Snelling race video. If you guys go back on my channel, it's 2017, I want to say, maybe 2018. No, it must have been 2017 Snelling. But somewhere in there, it was one of the first videos that took off. And the difference was I put in a map. So now my videos have gauges with power and speed and heart rate and everything that you guys see now. But that was the first time I put a map in. and I had kilometers to go. So I had like distance, and I had the map. Still no commentary, still no analysis, nothing like that. But I think that was the first. Yeah, I think that was the first time I was like, oh, I could explore this option of like actually doing analysis.
Because were there other people doing that on YouTube at that time?
Yeah, there's some other people that were doing that. I took it to the next level though, because I realized that there's a demand for it after that Snelling video that I posted, and I'd realized that there's a way to put polish on this. So so it was a progression. Like it wasn't one day I went from the rattly 1 hour race to where it is now. It was a slow and steady progression. And I think that's one thing that people have to realize if they're trying to make YouTube their side hustle or even their main form of income. It's just like it's a hustle, and like it's hard, and you gotta. It's a grind, right? Like you
got to put in the hours.
You got to put in the hours, and you got to work for all the viewers, and you got to put time into making the video polished. And I think a lot of people don't realize. We're getting a little bit sidetracked here, but I'll finish just by saying this.
It's all right. Yeah.
I know a lot of people think like, oh, Jeff made a 15-minute video, so it probably took him 20 minutes to make the video, right?
3 hours.
Another 5 minutes.
Hours.
That would be, you must be really efficient, because it takes me a lot longer for some of the stuff that I do. And the good news is I'm passionate about it and I enjoy doing it. So it makes that time enjoyable. It doesn't feel like an obligation or a job, because if it did, I'd stop doing it.
Let's say you get back to when you started at YouTube, what's one thing you wish you knew back then for maybe a quick shortcut to where you are today?
It's all about the content. There isn't a secret weapon to get hundreds of thousands of views. If you make good content, eventually you're going to be rewarded for making good content. People appreciate a polished product, and they don't have the attention span to go through a 30-minute video unless there's 30 minutes of actual engaging content. And I'd say the two biggest things are your content has to be either informational, educational, or entertaining, or I guess the third option is both.
Yeah, exactly.
But it has to have something in there. So I lean more towards informational, educational. That's just kind of how I am. I have an engineer, and like I have that part of my brain that is usually overwhelming the creative side of my brain. But also lately I've been trying to kind of explore more entertainment style content too, because I'm really the gold standard is both. But I would say, if you're not doing one of those two things, then you're probably not going to have a successful platform.
That makes sense. So you mentioned you are doing this. It's a side hustle for now. You still have a day job or full-time job?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have a full-time job and a career, and this is very much a lower priority than several other things in my life.
Got it. Would it be ambition in the future? Do you see that you could be doing that full time, or it doesn't pique your interest?
No, I mean, I'll keep doing it, and if it keeps growing, I suppose there's a certain point where I'm going to have to make a difficult decision, but I would have to grow tenfold where I'm at now, something like that. It would have to really explode for that to even be a consideration, because I enjoy my job and I enjoy my career, and I wouldn't sacrifice that, but the content's still coming, so don't worry about that.
So we mentioned that, but you started with your videos with only the GoPro raw footage, and then you move into voiceover, and then now we start to see a lot more yourself and your face onto your YouTube channel. What's the cause of this evolution?
So I really am just chasing what seems to be successful, what my audience seems to like the most. So, at first, people don't like 60 minutes of raw footage. So then I cut it, like I said, I added music or something. That made it a little bit more enjoyable, and it's been this steady progression. And there is an element of a face-to-face, I think, that there's a lot to be said for that. And a lot of my commentary is still just audio. There is an element of, I think, of a talking head that resonates a lot more. You can get your point across. People, body language is a big part of communication. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And also, I'm not as, I don't have the same reservations as I did before. I'm usually a kind of an introvert, believe it or not. But I've gotten better at dealing with that. And I'm able to sit here and talk with you in a long form interview and not feel the same pressure that I used to. So it's a combination of me chasing what I think people want the most, and also, the my reservations kind of going down, and me teaching myself to be better at doing an interview, talking head interview.
Your top 2 videos are from a crash in the thumbnail and a crash in the title. And lots of your videos who has a good amount of views also have crash in those. So why do people like to see people crash so much on their bike? Is there a reason for that?
I don't know. Why do people like to see crashes so much? Well, I have some thoughts. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
So I can reach into the psyche of my audience by looking at a lot of the comments that people leave. Yeah. So for one, yes, the crash videos seem to do really well. And I think part of the reason is because they're shorter videos, and people in general are much more likely to click on a shorter video. So there's that. Also, my core fan group, I have 70-something thousand subscribers. Those are my core fans.
Yep.
They're going to watch most of the content I produce. But when I have a video that has like over 1 million views, there's a lot of people that are outside of my core group, yes, my core audience. So I think there are a lot of people, based on the comments I see, that want to see a cyclist crash. And I think it's like they don't want it to be them. So another aspect of it is there a learnings from this? And that's the point where I've got my finger on the pulse, which is like, oh, I think people are clicking because they're like, oh, there's a crash. First, I want to see the carnage because people are weird.
Yeah.
But also, people are probably thinking, well, how can this not be me in the next race I'm at?
Yes,
you know?
Because you do then explain what happened and how can it be avoided. And I think that's where there's true value into your content, is that once you're going to be on your bike and into a similar situation in your Cat 4 race in your local area, you're going to remember that what Jeff said and hopefully get back home with all your skin, right? So
yeah, Jeff told me to ride in the drops. I must ride in the drops. Yeah, keep your head up in a sprint. You got to look where you're going, of course. Yeah, so you're totally right. I make it a learnings. And this comes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is success, you have to be educational, or there has to be some entertainment value. And I think the crash videos are just the trifecta. And it's a short video, so it's clickable. It's got a really wicked thumbnail, and it's got everything that viewers want. So I think that's why those have exploded. And it's good opportunity for me not just to be like, here's a crash, enjoy the carnage. I try to get some learnings in there, and like, here's how not to do this.
So I guess it's a good way to hook people into, and then discover your content from those a bit more viral videos, right? So they bring your content to a wider audience, and some of them will just enjoy the crash, and then will discover you, subscribe, and come back for your other educational and testing videos. And you haven't been into a lot of crashes, like.
Well, I have more crash footage that I have here on my hard drive that I probably will never show on the channel, because there isn't an opportunity for me to talk about what the learning is. It's just like the guy crashed because he overlapped the wheel, and there's not really much I can say about it. So there are some that I'm kind of thinking about what's my approach to discuss learnings from this. But I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm just doing it just for the carnage and the satisfaction of the carnage, because at the end of the day, I want to shed a good light on the sport, and I don't want this to scare people from trying racing.
Yeah, I'm sure your videos has brought so many new people to races. Did you get those comments sometimes that people say, hey, they started crits, or they want to get into racing and they ask you out?
Yeah, those are some of the most rewarding comments I get. I get a couple of comments that are very rewarding for me and motivate me to continue making content, which is the first one is, like you said, like, hey, I didn't even know that this was a sport that I could participate in, and now I'm a Cat 4 and I'm on a team, and like, thank you so much for introducing me to the sport. It's great. So there's those, and then the other one is that is great. That I love seeing is like, I don't even ride a bike. I don't race a bike. I don't even like bikes, but I watch all of your videos, which is also cool, because it's like, I must be doing something right. Yeah,
for sure. So as a YouTuber, you have you did grow some kind of a big audience, and you have a team. So Team Mike's Bikes, they have their own sponsors. And did you have your own personal sponsors? And how do you manage this kind of relationship between brands?
Yeah. So my Team Mike's Bikes, I am not involved with the management or the sponsorships for Team Mike's Bikes at all. Okay. So it's easy for me to draw a very clear distinction between I am a member of Team Mike's Bikes, but I also have this channel. And of course, I'm an ambassador for Team Mike's Bikes because I'm a member of their elite team. So there's always going to be a little bit of crossover. But when it comes to sponsorship opportunities, the things I negotiate don't become something that I pass along to the team, or vice versa. But for example, Specialized is a sponsor of Mike's Bikes. Specialized is also a sponsor for a lot of the content I produce on my channel. And you know, that deal was initiated in part because I knew contacts at Specialized through the local bike racing community, including some of my team members, and they're 20 miles away, the headquarters. So same thing with GU. GU Nutrition Products is a sponsor of Team Mike's Bike. So I have gotten opportunities by being by having exposure to people in industry through Team Mike's Bikes, but the deals are separate, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. And was there any conflict in opposing brands? Let's say Mike's Bikes is sponsored by Specialized. What if another bike manufacturer contact you for a video or for even a sponsorship? How would you deal with that situation?
There hasn't been a situation where there's a conflict, and that's because I have full creative control of what happens on my channel. So, for example, I don't know, fill in the blank, Canyon or Scott or another bike manufacturer reached out to me and said, like, hey, Jeff, we want to pay you a whole bunch of money to race our bike for the duration of the year. That would be a conflict because Team Mike's Bikes races Specialized bikes. So that would be a case where I would say no to the deal to remain on Team Mike's Bikes. And that would be an easy decision for me because I put being on Team Mike's Bikes and racing with a really close group of friends at a much higher priority. But unfortunately, that hasn't been an issue that I've dealt with.
Okay, cool. Because that's like something that I'm struggling with, so that's why I asked you your question. Is, my team has, let's see, Vittoria tires, and I have a hookup with Pirelli, and I'm just like, which one should I ride, or which direction should I take on? So, thank you for sharing your knowledge about that.
Yeah, and some teams don't give clear direction. On like what you can and can't do in terms of apparel or equipment and things like that. So it can get a little bit murky too. Yeah, it's an unintended consequence of having some fame and notoriety and a following on the internet. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So speaking of your team, Team Mike's Bikes, what if you had a $1 million budget to race and a pro UCI license? How would you spend that money if you were the general manager?
If I was managing and we had $1 million, God, you know, we're pretty lucky. So I am not in management now. I said that before. It's worth repeating. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like we have any limitations for what our current elite squad can do. So, like, for example, we have guys who have these big ambitions for big national level events. And when racing happens, they have access to those events because we have very generous sponsors who make that possible. So I think if I were in control, I would first of all make sure that everyone's needs are met who are on the team, if they're not already. And then I would start I would pour a bunch more money. We have a development team, but it's not a true development team like you see at a higher level, like in a professional development team. It's not like that. I would pour more money into development and find younger up and coming athletes and like hire coaches and hire staff and have them surrounded with all the people that they need to nurture and develop them into potential Tour de France winning athletes. I think that would be great for the sport, especially in North America where we don't have great representation on the world stage.
You're right.
And also I'd pour money into a women's team because that's another shortcoming in the sport right now. It's very male dominated and that would be two easy places to spend the $1 million, and we'd probably have some left over. So we'd have really awesome team parties on top of that.
Yeah, that's a really, really nice answer you got there. Yeah, women are underrepresented into the sport. What's your thought about it? Like, why is there less women into the sport?
That's a big question. I don't know. I don't know if there are barriers to entry. I know a lot of promoters have really pushed hard for equal payouts, which is a great step in the right direction. So for the longest time, you would see on a flyer, the race promoter would say, okay, men's P12 field has a $10,000 prize pool. Women's P12 field has a $2,000 prize pool. It's like, well, this is why women aren't motivated to get into the sport because they're at a 5-to-1 disadvantage in terms of their male counterparts. So what a lot of promoters have done is they've split the prize pools evenly.
That would bring the registration up probably for the women's and more incentive to travel for those races too.
I think you can make that argument. Yeah, and it would get more women interested in the sport from a younger age potentially. But that's just money. There also needs to be development from a more grassroots level of like, do kids, male or female, even know that this is a sport? It's not something that we talk about. I think if you talk to the average American about like the Tour de France, like they might just be like, oh, Lance Armstrong doping, and that's the extent of their understanding of the sport. Yeah. And that's a big driver for me, is like awareness of this sport. You know, it's a very interesting sport. It's not running, you know. I don't want to bash running, but there's this drafting component, and there's strategy, and obviously this is a big driver for the content that I produce. So yeah, I think we just need awareness in the sport in general, and make it, you know, equal opportunity for males and females the same.
Speaking of equal opportunity, you just launched a new series on YouTube called Couch to Crit, and there's two guys. Why don't you involve a woman to that series? Is it in the plans for the future?
Maybe, yeah. I would love there to be a season 2 or a season 3 and beyond. There's a lot of opportunities that I can look into for further seasons of Couch to Crit, and I would love to get you know, an email from a up-and-coming female athlete who is looking to get help and would like to be part of season 2. I would absolutely love to make that happen. It's a male-dominated sport right now, but I'll do what I can to buck that trend.
Cool. So why don't you tell more about this Couch to Crit series that we're just talking about? What's the idea behind it, and who are the two guys who are part of it right now? How did you find them?
So there's actually only one athlete, but usually on the episodes I will have another person on to help with the topic of that episode. So his name's Logan, the athlete who is the Couch to Crit athlete, and Logan is just like, he fits the demographic really well. The average viewer of my channel, he's 25. He has a full-time job. He has a wife. He has very little experience in endurance sports. Very little meaning like he trained for about a month thinking he was going to race in 2020, but then didn't. So the overarching theme of Couch to Crit is I need to answer these bigger questions, because my channel is all about race strategy. And I touch on these other topics like training and nutrition, but I've just kind of dabbled. And I get a lot of feedback from my audience saying, like, hey, Jeff, what's your training plan? How do I get faster? How do I improve my sprint on the bike? You know, how do I become a better climber? How do I have a proper nutrition plan for a race day? There's all of these big questions. So Couch to Crit is a series of videos that answers all of those questions. And I sat on this idea of making an online course. Behind a paywall was my original idea. Make an online course, very structured, very high production value, of how do you get faster, and breaking down every aspect of the sport. And then it would be intended for new racers to come in, follow my instruction, and follow these courses to become better and to become more educated in the sport. But it was just missing a little something. And when Logan reached out to me and said, like, hey, I have all these questions, you know, why don't we talk about it on your channel? I was like, bing, that's it. So then I was able to combine this idea that I had to make an online course, and now I can actually apply it to somebody. So it's not just like, hey, this is my suggestion, now take my word for it. It's like I can say, here are all of my tips that I've spent the last 10 or 15 years figuring out the hard way. We're going to fast track you guys from Couch to Crit Superstar. So that was the intention behind the video. And I encourage people to follow along. And hopefully in one season of Couch to Crit, you can learn all the mistakes and do it the right way and not have to spend 10 years screwing things up like I did.
Yeah, probably. And how much episodes going to be in that Couch to Crit?
There isn't a set number of episodes. I have my notes right here next to me. And it seems like every day I scribble down a new idea for an episode. So I'm going to go until that flame burns out, until I feel like there's nothing else to talk about. And one season might just bleed right into the next season. I don't know yet. I have so much stuff in my head that needs just to get out there. So that's the intention of this. So, and I told this to myself at the beginning, where I had more content, slightly less production value, but I'm just trying to do both. So, So I'm still trying to do a weekly upload schedule for Couch to Crit, and I'm trying to keep that same level of production. But the idea is, I talk with Logan, I put him through the training plan, and I bring professionals on to talk about, for example, nutrition. In a few days, I'm going to have a nutrition episode drop. I'm super excited about it. I have a sports nutritionist, a level 1 USA triathlon coach on, and he's just got a wealth of knowledge, and he upped my nutrition game just by talking to him. So a lot of interesting stuff.
Man, Logan is a lucky guy.
I've gotten, you won't even believe how many emails I've gotten from people like, can I be season 2? This is my application.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to move on into some questions that my Instagram audience sent me for you, actually. There's about 5 or 6, so just let's fire them through. Do you do any off-the-bike sprinting workouts? Do you lift weights, or do you like don't do that?
No, I don't do that, but I might have to soon. I'm getting older, man. I don't know. I'm race age 35 this year, so I know that muscle seems to atrophy as we get older, so maybe I'll have to do that. My sprint numbers have always been good, whether or not I do sprint-specific workouts. I might be able to increase it a little bit, but no, I am on the bike, and I focus on endurance workouts for the most part.
Have you always been an explosive type of guy, or that's something you work through your cycling career, or you struggle with endurance and you increase that over time?
I've always been explosive sprinter style, which is funny because if you look at me, I'm pretty lanky and I'm kind of taller. I don't fit the description of a sprinter. Okay. So I think I'm kind of a dark horse in that sense. People don't expect me to be a sprinter. Mm-hmm. I've had to work so hard for a decade on my endurance because I just don't have, I think it's a physiological barrier where I just don't have the slow twitch muscle fibers to give me an edge when it comes to climbing or like long efforts. So I have just drilled down and focused on that because I've beat this drum on my channel for years, which is if you have the best sprint in the world, it doesn't matter. You're still going to lose if you're not in the right position. And to be in the right position, this is an endurance sport. You have to have a high level of endurance. So that's what I work on. But yes, I have a natural explosive ability. This
was my problem when I got to cycling, because I come from 2 explosive sports in background, so downhill skateboarding and short track speed skating. So all I was doing was my sprints because I was good in sprints, but I was not even finishing the race. So no matter if you have an 18 watts per kilo sprint, if you cannot be into that peloton in that last 500 meters, it doesn't matter. So working on endurance when you're a sprinter is key, right?
Totally. Yeah, you understand my struggle.
Yeah. What was your first bike you ever raced on?
This is going to be another topic for Couch to Crit. But I've been giving this some thought. The first bike I raced on was a Fuji. It was a Fuji Roubaix, and it was I think $600, which to me at the time was like, whoa, this is a lot of money. And it's an aluminum frame, carbon fork, and probably weighed 25 pounds or something. But I catted all the way up to category 2 on that bike, and it's totally capable. It had aluminum box rims and balding tires, and I just didn't understand what I was doing in terms of equipment at the time.
And then now, what bike you're riding?
These days I'm spoiled, and I'm on the Tarmac SL7.
Ooh, that's a nice bike.
Fancy bike. It's a fancy bike, yeah.
Yeah. So someone asked about our current cycling federation here in Quebec, it's called the FQSC. They do not allow onboard cameras for racing. So we're not allowed to put GoPros on our bike or onto our helmets. It's this really old rule that, it said no cameras, no iPods, and no CD player, in the rule book. The question was, what's your thought on that?
I don't know why they don't allow you to put a GoPro on your bike.
Yeah, that's something I want to fight this winter for this summer.
I could see if it was headphones or something that distracts you.
Yeah.
But you're allowed to have a Garmin, right?
Yeah, you're allowed a Garmin, but you're not allowed for an onboard camera.
So
if you would have a message for our federation, I'm going to cut a clip about that. Can you let them know that let us ride with cameras?
Yeah, I'm talking to you guys right now. Let them race with cameras. It's like a liability issue. What happens if you get if a car runs into you?
Yeah, that's true.
It would be nice to have documentation.
And I do feel that if people in the peloton knows that they might be filmed, they will maybe do less sketchy move or do not throw elbows out. It will be for a safer race if there's a couple cameras here and there.
I wonder what the argument is for them to outlaw it. Like, I wonder why they don't. I can't even think of a good reason. There must be, but I can't think of one, because it can't be a distraction, because the Garmin is there distracting you with numbers and information. Yeah. The GoPro, you push a button and then that's it.
It's there. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope they don't implement that rule here in the States, else I'm in trouble. No more race commentary.
Yeah. Well, what were you gonna do?
I'd probably just still run it.
Yeah.
Cross my fingers.
Someone asked, how do you maintain passion for the sport, and if you have any tips for motivation when you don't want to ride?
That's a good question, because we didn't race in 2020. Well, we raced for about 2 months in 2020, and it is hard to find motivation. And this is a sport where you really have to appreciate and you have to love the process. So if a race goal isn't motivating you, which in 2020 you couldn't have a race goal motivate you because there was no racing, make your goal like a process goal or a fitness goal. Just say like, hey, I want to hit 4.8 watts per kilo by June, and then make that your goal. And I think for me, everyone's different, but for me, that would be something. I don't have a problem with motivation. I am a weird, crazy person. I can do intervals on an indoor trainer, and I have no problems with it. But for people who are lacking motivation, I would say find a way to set a goal that is outside of any external influence. So so it's just up to you and your desire to better yourself in terms of fitness would be a good thing. Say I want to lose 5 pounds on the bike. That's another thing that you can do to stay motivated and to actually have an achievable goal.
Yeah, that was what I was just about to go on. The goal needs to be achievable. It's easy to say, I want a 5.5 watts per kilo FTP, right?
Yeah,
that's
a race in the Tour de France.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen. So achievable goal is a really important target. And I guess if people need help to find that achievable goal, they can always reach out to a coach or to just a more experienced cyclist, and they could help them out, like just with a few tips.
Yeah, Strava KOM. Make a Strava KOM a goal.
Yeah, Strava is so good for self-motivation.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Quick question here about, would you like to come once the pandemic's over, of course, but would you like to come to race to Canada? And if yes, any race in mind?
Well, I don't really know the race schedule over there. I've never even been to Canada, so I don't know the race schedule over there, let alone the the race courses or anything like that. What are your suggestions?
The biggest race series would be BC Super Week. So you probably heard of that. Well,
I've had teammates who've done that. I've never done it. But.
So it's a mix of crit and road. It's not only crits. If it's happening this year, me and my team will probably be there because it's still in the same country. But people say it's a really, really hard race. Big cash prize too.
Yeah, big, like really strong fields. I've heard really good things about that race.
Yeah, there's all the continental team and usually like 1 or 2 pro team from Australia or from Europe that comes just because of the big cash prizes. And speaking of the cash prizes, what's the biggest you've won?
In cash, I've won bigger prizes in terms of stuff that you get, merchandise. But cash, probably the Sequoia Classic, actually. For just a single event, I would probably say the Sequoia race, which is in Visalia here in California in the Central Valley. And for years, it was put on by like Budweiser, which is really kind of an interesting sponsor. I don't know how the promoter made that happen. Actually, I know the promoter. I should ask him. But he did a really good job to make that race a big thing. And a lot of these crits in the United States, the ones that have big cash prizes, are either part of the USA Cycling national circuit, the whatever it's called, the USA Crits, or they are these races that are put on in conjunction with a township or a city. So I think like Visalia had a lot of financial backing for this Sequoia race to promote their city. So it was a downtown criterium. They had a beer garden. All the businesses were open. Oh, I miss it so much, man. I miss racing and I miss all this fans and back when people were able to be together and without masks and all that. So Yeah, that was probably the biggest one. So I won. Got in the breakaway with Justin Williams and a bunch of other really strong dudes, and I won a couple of preems, and one of them was like a $400 or $500 preem, and then I ended up like fourth, which wasn't a great finish, but that paid another few $100. So yeah, not much, right? Like we're not talking a lot of money. It was less than $1,000, but yeah, having to fill out tax paperwork always feels like you've done something really cool at the end of a race when you're filling out tax paperwork.
That is true. Someone asked, he's a beginner, and say, is power data useful when you're not competitive cyclist?
Got it.
Should you invest right away into a power meter, or something like you could be waiting for a while?
The biggest difference in my fitness came after I bought a power meter. So I would say that is a very high priority. If you're like, hey, should I get carbon race wheels or a power meter? Get the power meter. Definitely. It's a no-brainer. When I started the sport, power meters were $2,000 and you had basically one choice. Nowadays, you can get a single arm, 4 eyes power meter or Stages power meter for $250 or something. So you have no reason not to. It'll completely transform the way that you train, and you'll see immediate performance gains. So yes, I would say definitely.
Which power meter do you use?
I have on my race bike, it's the SRAM, the one that's built in. I think it's Cork, but it's the one that's built into the SRAM crankset. And so that's what I have on the race bike. And then Stages sponsors some content that I do. So I also run a Stages power meter. So I don't think you can go wrong. The thing, I think people get hung up on the accuracy of a power meter. And let me let you guys in on a little secret. It doesn't really matter, because as long as you're comparing your efforts against the same power meter, that's all you're doing. It's a relative change to where you were. So if the power meter is reading a little bit high or a little bit low, it doesn't matter, because it's always reading, as long as it's consistently reading a little bit high or a little bit low, then you're going to be fine. Yeah,
I mean, but people always will prefer to have their power meter read a little bit high to flex on Strava.
Yeah. Everyone's power meter reads low, but they would want it to read high, right?
Yeah. It's a good excuse, though.
Yeah.
My power meter is reading a little bit low.
Yeah, definitely.
So to wrap up this video, where can people find you online?
So it's NorCal Cycling is the name of my channel. You guys can check out all of my content there. I have an Instagram with the same name. It's NorCal.cycling, NorCal period cycling for the Instagram. And Jeff at NorCal-cycling.com is my email. If you want to reach out and you have additional questions, then let me know. Any of those avenues is fine. Do my best to answer all the questions. And it's been fun, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sure when I'm back to California, I'm gonna try to come to Alviso Crit.
Yes, please do. Are you gonna be able to get down to California?
I mean, as soon as the border open, I want to get back. I mean, at the start of 2020, just in March, I was in LA area, and the Malibu Hills it's the best place in the world. But I want to go back. I really like those.
That would be absolutely wonderful, man. You come down, we could race together. So let's try to make that happen, and then I'll try to go north of the border, and we can race up there too.
That'd be amazing.
All right, I'll be down in the comments answering questions for you guys too. So hope to see you there.
All right, that's it. Thank you, Jeff. Have a good night.
Yeah, later.